In the far reaches of Utah, not too far from the infamous Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch, another mysterious property lies shrouded in eerie legends. This small ranch, nestled adjacent to an Indian reservation and a modest cattle farm, belongs to Margaret and John, an older couple who have lived there for decades, unaware of the dark mysteries lurking nearby. Skinwalker Ranch has a notorious history of bizarre sightings, from gleaming UFOs and strange lights in the sky to cattle mutilations that defy explanation. But among the most terrifying tales are those of skinwalkers, malevolent shape-shifting entities from Navajo folklore. These beings are said to possess the ability to transform from human to animal, often taking the form of wolves, coyotes, or even birds, in order to carry out their sinister deeds. One cold winter night, the tranquility of Margaret and John's ranch was shattered by strange noises. It started with low growls and scratching sounds against the walls of their home. Initially dismissing it as wild animals, the couple ignored the disturbances, hoping they would go away. However, the sounds grew louder and more aggressive, thumping and pounding as if something or someone was trying to break in. Pulling back the curtains of their living room window, Margaret's blood ran cold. She caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure lurking by the side of the house. It looked like a creature out of nightmares, half human, half animal, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. "John, come here quick," she whispered urgently. John grabbed his old rifle, a remnant from his hunting days, and cautiously stepped outside. As he scanned the area, the figure darted behind the barn, blending seamlessly with the night. The next morning, John found odd, claw-like tracks near the barn, and several of their cattle brutally killed, but not eaten. It was as if the slaughter had been done for sport rather than for food. "Honey, I think we're dealing with something more than just a wild animal," John said, his voice tinged with dread. "This is like one of those skinwalker stories the locals talk about." Margaret shivered at the thought. The skinwalkers were said to be powerful witches who had committed unspeakable acts to gain the ability to transform into their animal counterparts. These creatures were feared for their cunning and malevolence, often bringing sickness, misfortune, and death upon those who encountered them. As night fell again, the couple fortified their home, but the entity returned, more determined than before. Margaret peeked through the curtains and saw a large wolf prowling their property, its eyes glowing a sinister red. John fired a shot, but the creature merely vanished into the night, seemingly unfazed. Terrified, Margaret and John reached out to the local Native American elders. One elder, a wise and stoic man named Gray Horse, came to visit them. He performed a protective ritual around their home and offered them talismans for protection. He warned them to stay vigilant and never show fear. As days turned into weeks, the strange occurrences gradually subsided, but the couple never truly felt safe again. They continued to hear distant howls and occasional scratches on their windows, reminding them that the Skinwalker was still out there, watching and waiting. Years later, Margaret and John sold their ranch and moved to a bustling city far from the haunting memories of their rural nightmare. But the legend of their near brush with the supernatural lived on, becoming yet another eerie tale whispered among those who dared to venture near the shadowed lands of Skinwalker Ranch. I grew up on a small ranch in the Utah basin, and it was the kind of place where you could hear the wind rustle through the aspens and see the stars stretch endlessly across the night sky. We were a close-knit family, just me, my mom, dad, and younger sister, Emily. But that tranquility was shattered one summer when we experienced something that still haunts me to this day. I remember it started when Dad mentioned seeing strange tracks near the chicken coop. Initially, we thought it might have been a coyote or a stray dog, But these tracks were different. They seemed to change shape and size. One moment they looked like hoof prints, the next like large human footprints. That night, as we sat around the dinner table, Mom told us about the old legends of the Skinwalkers, shape-shifting witches who could transform into animals. According to the Navajo lore she had read, these beings were malevolent and had the power to possess or curse anyone who crossed their path. I scoffed at first, thinking it was just another ghost story meant to keep us in check, but then things grew more sinister. We started hearing eerie cries in the dead of night, echoes that didn't quite sound animal or human. One evening, I was out in the barn finishing up some chores when I noticed the horses acting skittish, eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, I saw a shadowy figure dart past the barn door. When I rushed outside, there was nothing there but the chilling breeze. Emily was the first to encounter one up close. She was by the creek one afternoon when she saw a large black dog with eyes like embers staring at her. She said it didn't act like any dog she'd ever seen. It moved unnaturally, almost like it was mimicking the actions of a dog rather than being one. When she screamed, it bolted into the forest, but her description matched the tales Mom had shared. Those glowing eyes belonged to a skinwalker. Dad, ever the skeptic, decided it was time to confront whatever was stalking us. One night, armed with a rifle, he and I camped out on the porch, watching and waiting. It wasn't long before we saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the woods, shifting between human and animal forms. One moment it looked like a stag, the next like a tall, gaunt man. We fired a warning shot, and it melted back into the shadows, but the unnerving feeling lingered. The final straw came when we found our livestock brutally mutilated, an act too deliberate and gruesome to be the work of ordinary predators. We consulted a Navajo elder who advised us to fortify our home with sacred herbs and symbols to ward off the skinwalkers. Dad, still not entirely convinced but desperate, followed through. For weeks, we burned sage and scattered juniper around the property. The strange occurrences gradually subsided, although the memory of that summer never fully faded. The ranch, once our haven, felt different, haunted by the unseen beings that lurked just beyond the veil of our understanding. Even now, as I revisit the tales and walk through the ranch, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, wary of the shifting shadows, and wonder if they're truly gone, or just waiting for the right moment to return. We were deep in the backcountry of Utah, part of a tight-knit research group collecting stories about skinwalkers. Our days were filled with interviews, and our nights often found us driving down dusty old roads, guided only by the beams of our headlights. One night, after a particularly long day of filming, we found ourselves on a narrow dirt road. The sun had long set, and the darkness wrapped around us like a thick, suffocating blanket. That's when I noticed him, a man walking on the side of the road. It struck me as odd, but at first, I didn't think much of it. The area was remote, and seeing someone out here was rare, but something gnawed at me. What if he needed help? I voiced my concerns, and we decided to turn around. As we drove back, we all craned our necks, trying to spot him again. At first, there was nothing but shadows. Then, out of the darkness, the silhouette of a man emerged and started running towards us. His face was a blank, emotionless mask, and a chill ran down my spine. Panic set in, and we took off immediately, our hearts pounding. In the rearview mirror, I could see his dark figure growing smaller until the taillights swallowed him completely. We sped to the home of one of our contacts, a local who was supposed to share more stories with us. Still shaken, we recounted the event. The homeowner's face turned grave. "Never pick up hitchhikers around here," he warned us. "Skinwalkers lure motorists to pull over. Some have never been seen again." Back in the van, my mind raced. Did we escape something far worse than we thought? Suddenly, I remembered we had a camera rolling the entire time. We grabbed the tape and anxiously played it back. And there it was. As we passed the man, his shoes caught my eye, only they weren't shoes at all. They looked like fur-lined boots at first, but on closer inspection, they seemed more like hooves and fur. We stared at each other in disbelief, chills running down our spines. Whatever we saw that night, it wasn't human, and we were lucky to have driven away when we did.